Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking some time to join us on this rainy reading day. I'm sure it is for you, as it was for me. But this is really important, and we're really glad that you're here. Public libraries are all about helping people make better decisions, whether that decision is your next good read for your vacation or rainy Sunday, or whether you're trying to decide where to go to college, or maybe you're trying to pick a topic for your term paper. That's what we're here for. And part of making better decisions is having good information. So thank you so much for joining us for this first mayoral candidate forum, where we will get to hear from these fine people, all of which have already contributed so much to making our city better. And I want to thank each and every one of you for that. Moderating for us today is our very own Tamara King, who is our Chief Diversity and Community Engagement Officer. And with no further ado, I want to turn it over to Tamara to get us started. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Melanie. We are excited about tonight's event. We have wonderful panelists who have thrown their hat into the ring to be mayor. So joining us tonight will be Moe Baddourah, Councilwoman Tameika Isaac Devine, Mr. Sam Johnson, and Councilman Daniel Rickenmann. We will go in alphabetical order as we start tonight's program, but first, I want to read a little bit about each person. So, Mr. Badora came to Columbia when he was only 16 years old to follow the American dream. Moe was first elected to the city council in 2012 and subsequently won re-election. During his time in office, he was a steadfast guardian of the public interest, especially in the area of spending. He has led efforts to garner state and federal funding to clean up the arsenic and lead contamination in the Edisto Courts neighborhood. He was chair for public safety and responsible for the idea of bringing security cameras to our city. Moe has also chaired the Art and Historic Preservation Committee. In 2012, he was awarded the Outstanding Alumni Award from the University of South Carolina. In 2019, he received the Visionary Leadership Award. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Badora.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we'll talk about Ms. Devine next. Councilwoman Devine was first elected to the City Council in 2002. Tameika Isaac Devine is the first African-American female elected to the Columbia City Council and the first African-American elected at large. City Councilwoman Tameika Isaac Devine is a founding partner in the law firm of Jabber and Isaac and is a graduate of Spring Valley High School. During her tenure, Tameika served on numerous boards and commissions and also spearheaded the restructuring of the city courts and was instrumental in the establishment of the criminal domestic court. And she was also responsible for the nationally recognized homeless court. Tameika has been recognized as one of the 50 most influential people of the Midlands by Columbia Business Monthly magazine for multiple years and has been elected three times by the readers of the Free Times as the best city council person. Mr. Johnson is next. Mr. Sam Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. He was born and raised here in Columbia and is currently an attorney at Nexsen Pruitt, where he represents clients before governmental agencies and in matters stemming from government action. Prior to joining Nexsen Pruitt, Sam helped lead the office of the mayor under Stephen K. Benjamin. During Sam's tenure, the city of Columbia saw over $1 billion in economic investment and led a number of important projects and initiatives, including My Brother's Keeper Columbia, the Mayor's Fellows, the famously hot New Year celebration, the Regional Mayor's Collaboration, and the Bull Street Redevelopment Project. And last, but certainly not least, is Councilman Daniel Rickerman. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Rickerman. He is a longtime resident of Columbia. Daniel was first elected to Columbia City Council in 2004. Then in 2012, he decided not to seek re-election and instead focus his time on family and business. However, Daniel chose to run once again in 2017 and now currently serves as the Columbia City Councilman for District 4. Daniel was owner and partner in several restaurants in the city, including Birds on a Wire, Momo's Bistro, Ben & Jerry's, and the Filling Station. Rickenmann currently is a partner in several ventures, including renewable energy development, a food production company, and other small venues. Thank you all so much for answering the call to put your name in the ring to be the city's next mayor. And we're going to start off with a little bit of a table setting conversation where we're going to talk about your vision for the city and briefly kind of tell people about you. I know we just read your bios, but I'm sure there's more to tell. And we're looking at 3 to 4 minutes for each of you. And we're going to start with Mr. Badora.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for getting me started on this subject. I'll be the first one. So there's a lot of things we can do for the city. I believe this is the time where change is necessary. We are facing a pandemic all over the city and, of course, all over the world. And we have a lot of challenges, a lot of health concerns, a lot of challenges when it comes to that. A lot of challenges to bring the businesses back to order, a lot of challenges to keep our government operating by having enough revenue come in to keep the services going. And with all that in mind, the first thing that I'm going to do when I first get elected is establish a corruption team or a committee that goes after politicians or anybody in the government that utilizes their position to advance themselves and their family and friends into either financially or something else. So I think it's important that we go after the image that we're trying to protect and preserve for our city, our citizens. The second thing that I want to do is I want to continue our concentration into community policing and bring back substations in our neighborhood. As we have experienced in the past a couple of years or few years, actually, the trust between city government or police officers and community and neighborhoods are not there. We're losing that trust. And I think having community policing back to ground zero and operate and have a substation in a neighborhood to understand the neighborhood and their needs, it's a really plus way to improve the relationship between the community and the police station and police officers. Third, of course, the infrastructure. I keep talking about infrastructure from day one. I was elected in 2012. I think when I ran for City Council District 3, part of my agenda was to stop the transfers, and I was successful that while I was on council. And it's important that we reinvest that money every dime we make from revenue and bond issuing to produce clean water and eliminate sewer spillage all over our natural resources. So it's important that we continue that effort. And I think I made it clear that the Columbia Canal will be restored to original condition from the 2015 flood. And that's a promise I will make to all Columbians. Fourth one, of course, support small business. I myself is a small businessman. I've been a small businessman for a long time. Right now, I own a small restaurant. And I'm going to offer a no business license fee for any small businesses with less than 4 employees and $500,000 in revenue. I think that would help the small businesses. Not only that, but it would encourage a lot of small businesses to come to our city and employ our citizens and keep the economy going, at the same time support our neighborhood and our community. And last, of course, we have to look at other ways to bring businesses back to our city and employ and offer $50,000 jobs. And we can do that. We can do that with a lot of things that I've said in the past to improve the quality of life and improve our image in our city government and our communities for other companies to come in. And it's not a secret that we have a great university, great technical schools that we can support from and pull from to employ or have a good pool of employment for any company that wishes to come to Columbia and invest their money and efforts into our community.
Thank you. Councilwoman Devine, same question.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you to the Richmond Library for hosting. And thank all of the folks who are watching, because I know that this is very important. This is a tremendously important election. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tameika Isaac Devine, your current at-large member of Columbia City Council and candidate for mayor of the city of Columbia. You know, Columbia is home for me. This is the city that raised me. It's the city where I started my career as a practicing attorney. It is a city where I met and married my amazing husband. And it's the city where we have intentionally decided to raise our children. This is a city that has taught me about community and that has taught me about service. And I'm honored to have humbly served this city for the last 19 years. Together, we have done so much. We have faced challenges head on, and we've had lots of successes. From the 2008 recession, where I led through helping the city do an efficiency study and making sure that we were being more efficient in the way we were delivering services, to the flood of 2015, where I was out every single day making sure not only that our citizens were safe and that they had shelter, but that we also have the infrastructure ready to help people come out more resilient. And even now during COVID-19, we are struggling with a pandemic. And so in addition to facing the immediate health challenges that we have in COVID-19, I am working with businesses and making sure that they are stronger and can deal with the pandemic so that they can stay afloat, and making sure that families are financially stable and have the health benefits that they need to get through this pandemic. Together, we have done so many great things. We have invested in our parks. We have looked at expanding programs for our youth and our small businesses. We have expanded home ownership opportunities and made sure that our businesses, small, minority, and women-owned businesses, not only have the infrastructure necessary to be successful, but they have resources in their city that help them to grow. We have made very smart investments with public dollars while also strategically investing in growing our city. We have done a lot together, but there's still so much more that needs to be done. And that is why I'm running for mayor of the city of Columbia. I'm running for mayor to be a champion for all communities and someone who's promoting inclusive and equitable growth within our city. We know that our city has grown over the last few years, but not every part of our city has grown the same way. And so we need someone who will certainly focus on that. So whether you live in Rosewood or North Main, Shandon or Wood Creek Farms, you know that you have a champion in the mayor's office, someone who will roll up her sleeves every single day, dedicated to making sure that every part of this city is prioritized and every part of this city is growing. We have to have somebody who is not only promoting inclusive and equitable growth in this city, but is looking at ways to bring our city together in a way that we've not before, that we're working with our partners in the county, on the state level, over in Lexington County as well, and bringing real solutions to the table. I am a proven leader. I have served this city, and I look forward to this conversation today. Thank you so much, Tamara, and I look forward to everyone's questions.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Johnson, same question.
First, thank you to the library and to everyone who's tuning in and participating in this extremely important conversation. My name is Sam Johnson. I'm running for mayor because I grew up right here in Columbia, the son of a truck driver and an Alzheimer's nurse, a working class family. I know those challenges. I know those struggles. So this isn't about politics for me. It's personal. When I talk about creating new jobs and investing in small minority businesses, it's because I remember what it was like cleaning those offices and emptying those trash cans, my dad's janitorial company. When I talk about affordable housing, it's because I remember what it was like when my dad's trucking company failed and we lost our home. When I talk about a chief health officer, it's because I remember what it felt like when we lost my grandmother, my grandfather, and my aunt to COVID-19. And when I look at my beautiful 14-month-old little girl, I think about how I'll do everything I possibly can to keep her safe and to protect her. When I talk about public safety and making sure that we deal with gun violence head on, it's because I remember hearing those gunshots in my neighborhood too. When I talk about leadership, experience, and vision, and while my competitors here have close to 40 years on city council, I'm the only one that's actually served in the mayor's office. And when you serve in the mayor's office, when you are mayor, you have to make sure you have to lead. You can't just vote. You can't just show up for press conference. You actually have to show leadership. Because when Mayor Benjamin decided as a city that it was time for us to tackle Bull Street, he handed it to me and said, get it done. When he said it's important for us to make sure that all of our police officers have body cameras, he's handed it to me and said, get it done. When it was time for us to revitalize Main Street, to focus on building a Greenview pool, to making sure we have infrastructure, water and sewer all across the city, when it was time for us to make sure that we were restoring public safety funds after it had been cut in 2009, furloughing our first responders and closing down firehouses. He handed it to me and said, get it done. That's vision. That's leadership. That's one Columbia. And now it's time for us to take that vision to the next level. It's time for us to transform one Columbia into our Columbia. Now, I want you guys to do something a little bit strange here. I want you guys to close your eyes and imagine. Imagine a Columbia where an honest day's work equals an honest day's pay. Where when you go to start your business, you know that we're right here investing in you. And when you look at your children or grandchildren, you don't have to worry about them moving to Charlotte or Atlanta. They can live up to their God-given potential right here in Columbia. Imagine a Columbia that protects you from COVID-19, no matter what Governor McMaster says, where healthcare is as accessible and affordable in 29203 and 29204 as it is in Shandon. Imagine a Columbia where you don't have to worry about your kids and grandchildren dreams being lost and stolen because of a simple possession of marijuana charge. Imagine a Columbia where we take on gun violence head on. Imagine a Columbia where we fill potholes as soon as you notice them, where we build grocery stores in your neighborhood. Imagine a Columbia where you don't have to worry about your elected officials lining their own pockets, where a good idea gets on the agenda just because it's a good idea. That's what I'm talking about when I say our Columbia, because this is your Columbia and ours together. A Columbia has to be a place where the government works for the people, not the other way around. That's when I think about Columbia, that's the kind of Columbia that we want. That's the type of Columbia that we're fighting for. Now, my opponents might say I'm crazy. They said that about Mayor Benjamin. They might say I'm young and I'm too inexperienced, and they said that about Mayor Bob too. What they don't understand, and they never have, is that this election isn't about them or even me. It's about all of us together. And while they talk about the past, we are extremely focused on the future. When they talk about leadership, we are actually leading. And while they talk about what we can't do, we focus on what we can, because this is our Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, like I said, but certainly not least, Mr. Rickerman, Councilman Rickerman, please share your vision for the city.
Thank you very much for everybody taking time out of their Sunday afternoon. It's an exciting time, and we've heard a lot today. And the reality is that it is probably one of the most important elections that we'll ever see in Columbia. I've had the great fortune of living here in this town for 33 years and opened my first business in 1994. And a lot of that all stemmed from my parents who moved to South Carolina from Switzerland in 1967. And I'm first generation American, learned English in kindergarten, as you can tell from my foreign accent here. I have really adapted my home. But the reality is look, Columbia has great assets. We have great opportunities, and we need to take advantage of them. But we're competing against everyone in the Sun Belt today. So our focus really needs to be, having a safer, smarter, and stronger city. And when I mean that, safer, we need to continue to invest in our public safety. I mean, that's not just in our police department and our fire department, but into our employees, into public works, into our wastewater, into our water. All of our employees, we need to invest in them and give them the tools and the ability to do their job. That rolls into our smarter. We have so many hurdles that make us uncompetitive, but they're all fixable. And most of them are by just giving our employees the tools, the knowledge, the training to do their job and let them do their job. We've created too many hurdles through ordinances that are outdated, through committees that have too much range in their authority. And we need to reel that back and take advantage of the talent the city has. We need to continue to focus on selling our city. In today's world, in the market that we're seeing after this pandemic, and as we continue to kind of go through the ups and downs of the variants, the world's changing. Restructuring is happening. Folks are looking at, where's my next move? I want to be in a place that has great assets, which we do, great quality of life, which we do. But they also want a business-friendly atmosphere. And we need that business-friendly. That means fixing our property tax structure for non-occupied businesses and properties that allow us to be competitive with in-state, fixing our ordinances and giving the opportunity to get permitting easier, which we don't have to go far but across the river to see that in action. And then obviously stronger is by continuing to get investment in this town and recruiting. And today's recruitment is much different than it was before. But clearing the hurdles out of the way, opening up the door so that we can have more businesses and more entrepreneurial spirit. Because what you hear in our community today is people don't want jobs. They don't want to hear the word jobs. They want to hear jobs with opportunity. They want the ability to open up a business and carry out their dreams. And we have to do that as a community because it's 100. Everything that we do today has to be done as a community. There is no I or they, it is we. We, one Columbia, taking the opportunity to work together and engage. There's so many assets and people. There's so many people here with tons of information, quality, and businesses that we haven't tapped. We need to tap those resources, come together. As we've seen over the course of the last weeks and months, we've heard a lot of talk about opportunities. We've talked a lot about, excuse me, we've talked a lot about setting the stage and making the soil here prime for investment. But we can't do that in our current situation. We have to come together, collaborate, work with the school district to improve our schools, work with the school district and the county to levelize our taxes so we can compete. We can't compete against Greenville and Charleston when we're 38 to 48% difference in tax structure. All of this is fixable. It's all common sense. And then lastly is the beautification of our city. We have to focus on fixing the potholes, the sidewalks. There shouldn't be one neighborhood that looks different from another in our town. We've spent millions of dollars in other parts of town and in new projects and continuing to hear pitches of new projects, but we still have communities that need revitalization. And we need to take opportunities to leverage CBG money, the current, they call it the Choice Neighborhood Program, where we can get a planning grant to help grow and then follow that up with the implementation grant up to 35 million, which we could leverage with the private sector. But we can't do these things if we're not working together. So my vision for Columbia is plain and simple. I want a safer, smarter, stronger community. We have the basis. Now let's take these assets and leverage them and make every household strong and proud.
Thank you. And just an idea of how tonight's conversation is going to go. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to just have a conversation, lots of questions that Richland Library staff and other members of the community have submitted for tonight's event. And we're going to go in no particular order. I'm going to ask certain questions of two of you and then another set of questions for the other two. If there's any point in the conversation where a question resonated with you and you would like to put your answer in, you're definitely allowed to do so whenever you're called on next. Each question will allow each of you to speak for 2 minutes about the question. So if everybody's good, we're going to go ahead and dig down deep and start asking some questions. And then we're going to open up the floor after we've had our little conversation part of the forum. We're going to open it up for the public, who I know are anxiously waiting to ask some really deep questions of you, the next mayor of our fine city. So the first question I'm going to ask to two people who are currently not on county council. So that's Mr. Johnson and Mr. Badora. I want to know what your top area of when you think of what Columbia needs to improve on, what is that top area and how do you plan to address it if you're mayor? Mr. Johnson, you can go first. Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. No,
Let's let Mr. Johnson go first.
Sure. First, there's some key elements that any city has to have and has to own. Public safety is one of them. Education is another. So when I look at public safety, we have close to 90 vacancies. We've got to make sure that we're filling those vacancies, that we are utilizing innovative, fresh ideas to retain our officers. We've got to make sure that 3 to 5 year window where you see a lot of officers go to other municipalities around the state here where we're investing so much to train our officers and not able to keep them. We've got to make sure that we're utilizing creative solutions. So one of the things that we're going to put out in the next couple of days here is an addendum to our public safety plan, which looks at how we retain those officers, a 10-year contract where we're able to make sure that we retain those officers and give them a bump in pay and a retention bonus along the way. We got to make sure that we are competitive, as Mr. Rickenman talked about. You look at other cities and what they're providing, whether it's take-home cars, whether it's mortgage programs. We've got to make sure that we are as competitive as we possibly can be. As we talk about keeping our talent, we've got to make sure that in the police department that we are keeping our talent and are able to keep our officers here. We've got to make sure that we're innovative in tackling issues like mental health. We see so many challenges around mental health that our city and our state struggle with. And so we've got to make sure that we interject more mental health professionals, social workers into our police department. We see the beginnings of that. One of the things that I talked about was implementing body cameras during my time in the mayor's office. We see that policing has changed and evolved as society does. And as society continues to evolve, we've got to make sure that policing here in Columbia, a city that is the most diverse in the state, we got to make sure that policing continues to evolve with it and that we have the resources to make sure that Columbia has exactly what it needs.
Thank you. Mr. Badora.
Oh, thank you. I'm having video difficulties, so I'm hoping that you can hear me and see me. So good. So my experience with City Council, it's prepared me to understand what government is all about. So when I'm become your next mayor, the first thing I want to do is I do want to improve the image of the city and the local government. As I've mentioned before, corruption is a big concern on a lot of investors that wants to come to the city. And when I say about corruption, it's just not in the city government. It's the Richland County. It's the Alan Benedict Court investigation and the death of two citizens and residents in there, and everybody feels like everything has got swept under the rug. That's the kind of corruption I'm talking about, that we want to improve the image of the city. Of course, nobody is going to deny or argue that public safety is not important. That's why I'm proposing the community policing and reintroduce substations in our neighborhood. We want to understand and build the trust between our police officers and our communities. Look, I'm the first one or the only candidate on this panel that understand the balance between developing the city into becoming a hub for all new businesses and small businesses in particular, and to protect our communities, our neighborhoods from everything, from crime to gang members to shootings. I mean, that's the kind of experience I've gained since I was elected or served 2 terms in the city council. We've inherited some bad decision from old councils or old government that happened in the city, and during my council time, I've dealt with it, and we tried to fix it, and we fixed it. For the whole time I was a councilman, we never raised 1 cent of property taxes for city residents. We maintained. I promised my residents and my voters to improve the water and sewer and make sure that we continue to keep every dollar in the water and sewer department, so citizens of the city can turn on the faucet every day or anytime they want and have a clean glass of water at any time, any moment. That's the kind of services we need to bring to the city, and we need to concentrate on bringing that level of service to our citizens. And when I'm mayor, I know how to do this. I know that I have the experience in government. I have the experience in business. I have experience in dealing and balancing the development and protecting our neighborhoods. And that's what I can bring to this table to make this happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Baddour. And that leads into this next question. The White House recently unveiled the American Jobs Plan, right? That talks about infrastructure in South Carolina, as well as all of our states. And they said some pretty strong things. So the American Jobs Plan said that South Carolina has suffered from a systemic lack of investment. And the plan highlights the need to repair our roads. It talks about affordable housing and the need to acknowledge that, and the lack of childcare. They call us a childcare desert here in South Carolina. They also talked about $18 million to improve VA facilities, which we have one right here in the city. So the 2 members of county council or city council that are currently on city council, Councilwoman Devine and Councilman Rickerman, I would love to hear how the American Jobs Plan, that plan, coincides with your plan to support infrastructure here in the city. Mr. Rickenman, I'd like you to go first, and then Councilwoman Devine.
Sure. It's an incredible time right now with all the access to capital that's coming down to be utilized. The state's getting 2.5 billion, the county's getting 80, we're getting 30 million. We have to take those funds and really leverage, but we need to be very smart about how we do that and how we attack that. Most of what we need to really focus on is internally, and how do we leverage that to bring all the opportunities for that, if it's leveraging for affordable housing. Now, one of the things that there's a lot of discussion about workforce housing, affordable housing, and how we have a need in our community. But it's interesting to see is when you start looking at how we've leveraged HUD funds, and something we really need to investigate more is, why does it cost us $23,000 more in this investment than the average in the state, and obviously a lot more, almost double what Charleston and others. So are we leveraging our dollars correctly? So as we move forward, let's don't rush to go spend this money. Let's take our time and really figure out, how do we put this into work that's the best investment? The 30 million that's coming in as well, that we can use to look at, upgrading our body cameras, getting tools, second set of gear for the firefighters who are only, with one set of gear right now, which, several weeks ago we had 3 fires, which could have ended up in steam burns for our firefighters. Investing in our firehouses, there's just so many things that we can tackle now with the leverage of all this, that we need to be smart about it. The investment internally needs to be first. We need to make sure that we have everything that the city needs to provide service equally and equitably all across our community. And so we need to take our time to do that. And we don't need to rush it, but we also need to leverage it through collaborations. There's a lot of talk always about, well, the city needs to create this, or the city needs to create. Well, the reality is there's a lot of partners already doing the work here, and we need to leverage those collaborations. If you look at the success in other cities, if it's Durham, Raleigh, Lexington, Kentucky, Nashville, even Atlanta today, what they have done with those partnerships and leverage it to make sure that each and every community within that city is getting its equitable needs, but also making sure that we're taking care of the employees so that they can do their job. So I think with taking the time to really analyze each thing, as the rules have been changing so far, and all the recovery money, it changed from March to now, it's changed differently on how we can use it. So I think we need to start planning, but slowly before we implement and spend.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilwoman Devine. Same question.
Thank you so much, Tamara. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands there's several federal dollars that we're talking about. I think some of the things that Councilman Rickerman talked about was actually the American Rescue Act plans, the ARPA funds that we have already been allocated in the past. I think your question was specifically about the American Jobs Plan, which Congress, the House, the Senate has actually passed bipartisan. The House comes back this week, and we'll start looking at that. So hopefully we will have some guidance and some direction on this. But I do agree. I think we need to be very thoughtful and mindful at the way we utilize these dollars, and leverage the dollars with certain things we already have, with what the state has, and also what the county and Lexington County has. I keep saying it is so important that we understand that the capital city, we are the leader of the Midlands, but we are stronger together. And we certainly have to have a leader who is going to be able to work with all of our partners so that we can maximize and leverage the dollars for the benefits of our collective citizens that are here in the Midlands. But very specifically, I am actually on the board of the National League of Cities. And so as an executive committee member of the NLC, I've been lobbying weekly for these funds. And so we lobbied for the American Rescue Act funds, the American Job Funds. Just last week, I was on a conference call where we were talking about the needs in our communities about these funds. Some people may have even seen on social media that I was standing in the middle of Assembly Street in traffic, talking about the needs that we have on Assembly Street. And so we already have plans. These monies will allow us to actually make those plans a reality and implement them. We have a lot of plans on the books, but there's certain times that we don't have the money to actually implement them. The American Jobs Plan will allow us that opportunity, whether it is investing in our roads and bridges and sidewalks and that infrastructure that is so very important. Or if we're implementing Walk Bike Columbia and making sure that we are more pedestrian and bicycle friendly and multimodal here in this city, so that no matter what modes of transportation you want to use, you have access to that. Certainly there will be money to the comment that will come in that will help us understand our public transportation system and really make that a better system that not only is good for the people who are currently use it, but hopefully encourage more people to utilize public transportation. In addition to those things, I think it's really important that we understand when you talk about investments and equitable investments, you have to understand what areas of the city have been traditionally underserved and how do we utilize this money to invest in those communities in a bigger, bolder way. And I'm excited that the library partnered with me at the end of last year and early this year to have a community-wide conversation about the color of law. And we really explored the way this community specifically was intentionally segregated by lack of investment by the community, by the city, by the county, by the state, and also the way we did not invest in our communities. So when we look at lack of affordable housing, when we look at lack of when we look at food deserts, when we look at lack of sidewalks even, all of that can be traced back to decisions that were made many years ago. And so we've got to be strategic in our investments, but we also need to understand that if we are really truly going to build an inclusive and equitable city, we have to utilize these funds and others in a way that makes meaningful investments to bring all communities up, make sure that we have what is needed. And so that may mean something different on North Main than it does on Garner's Ferry, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it. We just have to be strategic and understand the needs of our community and how do we invest those dollars in a more equitable way. And as I continue to work with the National League of Cities and other partners, you mentioned about childcare and other things. We also have to remember that we also have the American Families Plan that will start to be debated as well. And so there's so many needs in our community that money will be utilized for. So we need to look at what's currently planned, how we can invest in it, and then how can we build upon and leverage those dollars in a bigger way.
Thank you so much. And the next question kind of dovetails right into what we talked about with the infrastructure plan. And I know Councilman Rickenmann has had some thoughts about this, as well as Mr. Johnson. I'd love to get the two of you in this conversation about affordable housing in our city. Columbia is ranked 8th in the country for not having affordable housing and having a high eviction rates. What do you guys see for the next whoever's mayor next? How are you going to grapple with that issue? How are we going to reduce that number where we go from 8 to maybe 150 or something, where we're not in the top 10 of the top eviction rates? There have been stories in the newspapers recently with COVID-19. There's so many people having a real crisis when it comes to housing. How do we really address affordable housing in our city and lower those eviction rates? So that's for Mr. Johnson and Mr. Rickerman. Each of you gets 2 minutes.
Absolutely. So, we are at very challenging times. This is an issue that the city has studied over and over again. We've had multiple committees, multiple groups that have come in and worked on this issue. Councilors had several committees themselves that have worked on this issue. What we've got to do is be aggressive and move the needle. My background working in the mayor's office, as well as working at Next and Pruitt, I've had the pleasure of working on these types of challenges, working to help actually bring affordable housing projects to Columbia, but then also representing and working with folks to bring those projects to Columbia during my time at Next and Pruitt as well. So I've been on both sides of this conversation, both in the government and private sector. We've got to make sure that we're being extremely aggressive. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I know that challenge of housing here in Columbia uniquely. We've got to make sure that not only are we focusing on affordable housing in the conventional sense, that we're looking at some of our housing challenges as it relates to our seniors, as it relates to some of the folks who are just graduating college here, where we want to retain our talent, but we don't have anywhere for them to live that's affordable, workforce housing. So we've got to make sure that across the board, we're looking at Columbia, making sure that we're competitive, that we're able to have somewhere for folks to lay their head in dignity, right? And so those are challenges that we have to address head on. But part of that is also having infrastructure. And so going back to that last question that you asked, Ms. King, we've got to make sure that we are leveraging our resources, to think boldly about not only our local resources like water and sewer, but thinking boldly about Wi-Fi and broadband. We look at the severity of having Wi-Fi this past year. Our children being stuck at home and doing virtual school. All right, can you imagine trying to do that where you have hotspots that may or may not work, where you have folks who are grandma trying to figure out how to utilize the hotspot and that sort of thing. We've got to invest in fiber and broadband so that we utilize, for example, those ARP funds to bring that here to Columbia. When we talk about making sure that Columbia is the most attractive place possible, where we have folks who are going to be moving from the Northeast and all around this country to Columbia, one of the things that they have to have, especially if they're going to be working from home, they've got to have infrastructure here that allows them to do their job and be competitive.
Thank you. Councilman Rickerman.
So I'm gonna add about 5 minutes to mine, right? No, look, the reality is it's a serious issue that we have to address. And one of the things we have to make sure between workforce housing, obtainable housing, also helping people get into home ownership by leveraging our relationships and leveraging the federal dollars and the different programs, but being creative as well. All of that's just part of it. But if we don't address the property tax, we're never going to be able to deal with it, because right now, out of 46,000 homes in Columbia, 26,000 of those are rented. All right, 3.5 months of each rent that people are paying is going to the property tax. That means the owners are limited in what they're putting back in. And you hear stories about people, I can afford my rent, but in the high cold months or the hot summer months, I can't afford the power and the rent. So weatherization is a problem. Our CPAC committee did a pretty intense study and really showed us that that's one of the lacking things. I think the safe and affordable neighborhoods, taking the opportunity to leverage going vertical. We have not embraced vertical growth in our town like we should. Creating high rises and other opportunities where we have families and workforce housing and a mixed blend. We had a great opportunity years ago to go to Charlotte and see some of these different opportunities that are put together. We've just got to adapt it. We've limited ourselves through our zoning and other issues that create problems, with workforce housing or affordability because of not allowing density to grow. But that's all part of the whole aspect that we have to look at. But if we don't address the property tax, we're never going to be able to give that opportunity for folks, because that cost of a non-owner occupied dwelling is just so high and intense today when you look at it. So if it was a $200,000 house and your tax bill is $1,800, well, that's for a homeowner. You add that number back at a 6% rate, they're at $3,800. You're talking about a big $3,800, a lot more than that. It's almost about $8,000. And so when you look at that, and then you add the car taxes and all this thing that takes away from the affordability, we really have to engage in that conversation with everybody going, look, we've got to address property tax. We also need to address opportunities where we can and encourage growth. We have odd lots. We have to be creative with our staff to open up opportunities to build smaller and higher dense areas.
Thank you.
Tamara, I'm sorry. You said it was someone. Can I jump in just very briefly? I won't take 2 minutes, but as the current chair of the city's Affordable Housing Task Force, what I will say is that, yes, this has been studied before, but previously under Mayor Coble, we had an Affordable Housing Task Force that actually came up with recommendations. We actually did implement those recommendations, but it didn't go anywhere when we changed administrations. And so, a few years ago, I asked Mayor Benjamin if I could take on pulling together a committee. And so I've recruited experts in not only this community, but in the state on affordable housing. And we've been meeting. We actually have action items to move forward. You have to have a mayor and someone who will lead and make this a priority. So just as currently we had the priority of student housing and incentivizing student housing, and if you look around downtown, down Hugie Street, you will see student housing booming downtown. that same priority that was given, our next mayor needs to give that priority to affordable housing. I've led on this issue. I know what affordable housing is. I know people who live in affordable housing. I utilize affordable housing. And so it is so important that we understand what affordable housing is and that we understand and bring our community apart. You know, unfortunately, we've had council members who have not supported affordable housing developments because they don't understand what it truly is. And so you have to have a leader who's going to move forward. And you mentioned evictions. Nobody's mentioned that. Eviction court is something that, as a practicing attorney, I see it all the time. And so we are implementing an eviction court. We're also looking at addressing not only home ownership opportunities, but rental opportunities. You know, Bull Street actually was not any affordable housing proposed for Bull Street, but I talked with affordable housing developer who wanted to be there. And now we're going to have an affordable housing development on Bull Street. So again, it's about the leader making it a priority and not just saying it's a priority, but having action items and being able to move it forward. And the mayor has the ability to bring all the parties necessary to pull that together. And so I just wanted to add that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me chime in. Can I chime in for a second?
I was about to say you had your hand up, please.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I need to kind of come back on that. So with the infrastructure money that is coming in from the federal government, the first thing that we should do as city government or mayor when I get elected is we're going to put that money back that we borrowed or we took out of the water and sewer to help through the pandemic. That's the first thing we got to do, because you can't go away, you know, improving the city and try to bring more businesses and try to bring more people to come and live in the city without having a secure water and sewer system that supports everybody. So let me make sure that's $4.5 million that we took up from water and sewer, this current council members that took them from water and sewer to use for the pandemic relief. I understand it was necessary for that time, but now it's time to put it back where it belongs. As in for low-income housing, once again, you know, when I was on council, we got talked into demolishing Gonzalez Garden, Allen Benedict Court. You know, we tried to talk to the leaders up there about revamping those buildings and put people back in right away. And instead of waiting 2.5 years, 3 years, and then now they decided they want to demolish it and rebuild new ones. There's a lot of things that we can do, we could have done. As mayor, I can lead that effort to making that happen. Gonzalez Garden, there's no reason why it's sitting there with empty lots everywhere. They built 10, 12 homes and kicked so many people out. Same thing with Allen Benedict during the disaster of 2 dead people, and the mishandling and mismanaging of the whole corporation. But when we look at other cities and how we can pick some samples or learn from them, number one, New York City, they have a private-public partnership where low-income housing is managed by a private company, even though the New York City or the state of New York offered some tax incentive, we even build the buildings for them. They have a private company that maintains it, that collects rent, that screen through their applicants, and make sure it's safe, not dangerous, no drug dealing, no gang members. That's the kind of things we need to look at. As mayor, I can lead those conversations. I can lead us to get out of the rut of having low-income housing, low inventory. And because that's the kind of stuff we need to look forward ahead of time. You can't keep dumping money on a problem and thinks that it's going to help it. It's not going to help it. You have to tackle the issue. You have to tackle the source and the problem from the get-go so we can go forward and move on and deal with it. But you can't just dump money on a product, give them 50% tax incentives or this. It's just not the right way to do it. You got to make it safe. You got to make sure that the people who stays there are in there for a reason, and they need the low-income housing, and that's what I can do as mayor.
Great, thank you for all chiming in, and I feel that my questions are so just thought-provoking, and you all want to chime in. So the next question is for all 4 of you, right? But that means that everybody has to play well in the sandbox and give me 2 minutes of comment. And this may be unfair because this is a big question. It's about COVID-19, and there are many issues the next mayor is going to have to address, as you all have laid out today, right? But COVID-19 is something that is right now, it's like a never-ending pandemic that we are in. We're seeing waves every single day, increasing the number, and even here in the city. And we've heard about our hospitals being pushed to the brink. So how would you, as mayor, and we'll start with Mr. Rickerman, and then we'll go to Ms. Devine, Councilwoman Devine, and then Mr. Badora, and then Mr. Johnson. I would love to hear how you all would like or can see how a mayor can really help create a balance right now with COVID-19 and trying to address that, as well as continuing to look at entrepreneurs, our business community, and the health and safety of our residents. How do we do that? How do you tackle the big, the big, never changing, never moving, it seems, pandemic? How do you tackle that as mayor? I would love to hear it, starting with Mr. Rickerman.
Well, I mean, it is a balancing act because we're at a place now that we can't afford in our community to shut down the community, but we really have to encourage. Number one, we really have to continue to encourage vaccinations. Number one, it's proven that it keeps you out of the hospital. And you've noticed probably, I think, what is it, 77 or 88% of somewhere in between there of the folks that are in the hospital today are unvaccinated. So we know it works. We're going to be at a point now soon where we're going to be pushing boosters, but we still got to get over this hump. Everybody on this panel today is doing something out there to push this forward, and we continue to all say the same message. That the reality is we need to get the vaccination. We have to work together, and you know, the mask issue has been a legislative nightmare for everybody. And the reality is we need the legislature to fix the proviso to allow the community, especially in the schools, to deal with it on a case-to-case basis, because what happens in Richland 1 or 2 may not be the same in Lexington or in Greenville or other places. We're seeing people today wearing masks and continuing to do it on a basis for their community. Restaurants, businesses making choices, businesses making tough choices when it comes around to pushing their employees to vaccination. But, you know, hopefully the FDA will come through with the approval, which will take some of the argument out and concerns from the community. We have to continue to really move forward in supporting the businesses and showing people, if we continue with keeping things and being smart where we go, where we can social distance, where we have the opportunity to continue to keep the businesses open. You know, we see today, I went to Soda City yesterday, great crowd out there, mixed bag, people, some masked, some out, but everybody being very respectful and trying to not only support the local businesses, but also kind of watch out for themselves as a pandemic. This, unfortunately, I think has gone beyond pandemic. It's no longer going to be a pandemic. It's going to be something like the flu that's going to continue, and we're going to have to battle, and we're going to have to continue to take advice and data and look around and be creative. One size doesn't fit all. We're going to have to take it by a case-to-case basis. But the bottom line is that we need to continue to push people to get vaccinated so that we can operate, so that businesses can stay open. We've never seen anything like this in Columbia because we've been pretty much recession proof. Floods, hurricanes, you name it. The state's been open, the schools have been open, and the college has been open that allowed us to continue to, as a capital city, to operate and grow economically. And this is what the pandemic showed us, that we have a real gap, and we need to address each of those. We talk a lot about getting out to the healthcare and everything. We've got to get people to trust the healthcare system when it comes to the vaccination, and making sure that because the pandemic, that they shouldn't stop going to see their doctor, and making sure they're getting their well checkup and everything else, because all of that is coming into play.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilwoman Devine.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I will say to your question about balancing all these. Well, I'm a mom of a soon-to-be 16-year-old, 11-year-old, and 4-year-old. So you know that I am always balancing competing priorities, and I get them all done. And as mayor, I will do the same. I don't think we have competing priorities here. We need to understand that we have to deal with the immediate health issues of COVID-19. That means continuing to encourage more people to get vaccinated and making sure that we are understanding where there is vaccine hesitancy and addressing those myths or misconceptions and educate people about the effectiveness of the vaccines and making sure that people have access to get vaccinated. In addition, we need to make sure that we are following the science and the guidelines and not letting politics get in the way and mandate or have mask wearing mandated where necessary, and make sure that we have people who are protected, especially those vulnerable populations, those under 12 or those who might be immune compromised that have issues with taking the vaccine, because we have to understand that we have several ways to combat this. We also got to continue to follow the guidelines about not having large events, being socially distanced. And so it's important for us to continue following the science and getting the right information out in our community. But in addition to the immediate health issues, we have to look at, what COVID-19 has done. And as mayor, we will need to do lots of things. As mayor, I will make sure that our businesses are strong and they're resilient. I remember when we were talking about how businesses were going to deal with the pandemic. Small business on North Main Street didn't have contactless ability, didn't even have the ability for people to order online. I worked with them directly with our Office of Business Opportunities, and not only were we able to get them where you can order online, you can actually go in, pick up your food, you get a text, your food's ready, you go in, you pick it up. Those are the things that not just how we deal with COVID, but just smart business practices. And so those are the things that we're going to have to do. And then in addition to that, we need to also just realize that COVID-19, the health disparities that we have were already existent in our community. I've been working for many years trying to work with Prism Health and others to elevate the issues on health disparities. But as the mayor, we've not had a mayor to convene the health professionals in town. I've worked in conjunction not only with help with DHEC and Prism Health, but bringing together MUSC, who is now in town, and others, and make sure that we're addressing those things. What I will say is our way is not to create positions that don't have the authority to do things in our community. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're working in tandem with our county partners and our health partners, and really making sure that we're addressing the immediate health issues, but also the underlying issues that have been plagued our community for years, and have someone who certainly understands health issues to get in the trenches to make sure that we're working together to address those within our community.
Thank you.
And I see your little time. I saw it.
This is so everybody knows. This is my little.
Mr. Rickenman went over.
I did not.
Typical politician argue about the time allowed to answer a question, right? So I guess it's my turn, right, Tamara?
Well, I had Mr. Johnson, but if you'd like to jump in, you can. Please go ahead. And then Mr. Johnson.
Listen, mine is not going to take 2 minutes, because I think a lot of what it was said already kind of correct, and some of it is correct, and some of them it's not. But as mayor, I'm going to lead the effort to increase the vaccinations with city residents. I mean, I will be in every TV station, every social media, encouraging people to go and get vaccinated, because it's the only way you're going to get rid of or maintain or eliminate this virus. I think I have to agree that this is an continuing health hazard is going to continue forever or for a long time. It ain't going to go away in a year or two. I think it's important to understand that we need to change our habits of dealing with everything that we do, whether washing your hands, social distancing, not necessarily wearing masks all the time, but it do have the ability or that wild card that if it gets too bad, that we're going to encourage or require mask wearing everywhere. It's important that we, as a father, and Tamika's got young kids and that go to public school, that the teachers are vaccinated, that the place where they are trying to learn and not worry about getting a vaccine or getting sick should be the last thing on their mind. Let them go and be in a safe place where they can learn and concentrate on and focus on learning. So that's why it's important to get the teachers and the education system all vaccinated as fast as you can. And the last thing is we need to really invest back into our small businesses. And so for them, it's an extra expense to go and get extra gloves, extra face masks, extra sanitizers. Me as myself, as a small business, It's not a burden, but it is an expense. It's something that we do as business owners. As mayor, I will find ways to help those businesses, whether through a little bit of grant or a monthly expense or a check or financial funds to help them through the next 3 months or 6 months and so on. It's important that we feel and understand the pain and the suffering of small businesses that comes with the extra expense from this pandemic and the coronavirus. I'm under 2 minutes, right?
You were right at 2 minutes, actually 2:10. Sam
Great.
Johnson,
Thank you.
go ahead.
2:10, I'm gonna go for 2 even.
All right, let's do it.
So I'm gonna set the record straight real quick. When we talk about committees like environment and infrastructure, as we're talking about housing, for example, we're talking about a committee that Ms. Devine chairs that hasn't met in only twice before this year. So when we talk about getting more housing in Columbia, we've got to make sure that we have committees that are meeting. When we talk about public safety, for example, a committee that Mr. Rickenman chairs, we're talking about a committee that hasn't even met in 2 years. So when we talk about these core challenges that we've got to conquer here in Columbia, we've got to make sure that we're doing the work. When we look at leadership and vision, we've got to make sure that we're talking about issues and thinking big. So, for example, when we talk about Bull Street and affordable housing coming to it, we can't not vote for something and then see the project moving forward and having affordable housing on it and calling it a win. We've got to make sure that we have a vision at the outset of these conversations. And so it's that type of vision when we start looking at, for example, a chief health officer, someone who has the opportunity to bring data and science together. When we're talking about some of these issues and misconceptions that are out there, we need somebody, not an elected official, but somebody who has a public health background, who's able to make sure that we're shooting straight and we're addressing these issues and challenges head on. Somebody who has that expertise, who's able to work with their colleagues, with DHEC and our hospital systems, our nonprofits that are doing this work. Mr. Rickenmann talked about each and every community having equity and equitable resources. And so when we start talking about healthcare outcomes that look totally different on one side of Columbia and than another side of Columbia, we've got to make sure that we address that with a fresh new idea. And so when I look at somebody who came to me and said, "Hey, I would love to have a vaccination drive, but I don't know where to have it. I don't know where to host it." They asked me if there was somebody at the city that they could call who wasn't an elected official, and they had to scratch their head. That's the kind of leadership that we need. So I'm gonna stop there because that's my 2 minutes.
Ms. King, since he mentioned me and Mr. Rickerman, rules usually we can respond because I'd like to respond.
Go ahead. I'll give you guys a minute to respond. Can we do it in a minute, you think? I want to get to, we have some questions from the community, and I have one more question that I really want to ask. So, but I will let Mr. Rickerman and Ms. Devine, I'd like for y'all to chime in and give you a minute to respond.
Okay, I'm already off mute, so I'll start first. So thank you, Mr. Johnson. But I'm gonna tell you, number one, this is where leadership matters and where people understand what really happens. So yes, I chair the Affordable Housing Task Force because after 3 State of the City addresses where it was mentioned that this was a priority, but nothing was done on the city, I asked Mayor Benjamin, could I chair the committee? And we have met for 1.5 years during the pandemic and come with real solutions, brought forward a report already to council. So, it is important that people understand the roles of council members and what you can do as mayor. It's interesting that people will say what they will do as mayor, but I can tell you what I have done and people know my work. As far as the Environment Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Rickenmann and I serve together on, and we actually have a climate protection action plan. Our current, we did a pledge, our mayor did a pledge a few years ago to go 100% renewable. There hasn't been any action. So as the Environment Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Rickenmann, myself, and Mr. Brennan are working towards action items. So I will say that, when things are said, please fact check and make sure you understand. I certainly have the receipts. I can bring them forward as to what I have done, what I will do. I don't just take credit for what someone else did when I work for them. I actually have done the work.
Thank you, Mr. Rickenmann.
Well, I would just say that, just because a committee meets doesn't mean that we're not doing our job and not working there. Not everything has to go to a committee to be done. It gets done at the council level. And for those of us who spend a lot of time and do research and move forward, do it at the council level. And, there are a lot of issues that have been thrown out by candidates in here that I find interesting that, if you were in that role and you had so much influence, why didn't y'all deal with it then? And why haven't he dealt with it now? So, the real question comes at this point is that those of us who've been working hard and striving this forward city, you can't say the city's in great shape at one time and then come back and attack us telling us we're not doing our job, because beyond popular belief, you cannot do this thing by yourself. It takes 4 people at the minimum to get anything done at the city. So let's be fair and honest is that we all have different ideas and conceptions on how it should go, but those of us who've been standing up here tirelessly working understand what's been completed, and so does the community.
Thank you. In this next question, I'm going to ask for all 4 of you, because I think it really speaks to where we're going as a city and in our being as inclusive and equitable as possible. And it goes back to an ordinance that City Council passed recently about conversion therapy. And that band prohibits licensed and professional therapists from offering conversion therapy, and that attempts to change the sexual orientation of LGBTQ plus minors. This effort was cheered by many members of the LGBTQ plus community and was seen as a way for governments to affirm the lives and experiences of all in our community. What can you all do as mayor? And we'll start with Ms. Devine, and then we'll go to Ms. Badora, and then Mr. Rickenman, and then Mr. Johnson. I'm trying to keep track of who I let go first. But I would like to know, as mayor, how do you create a more inclusive city? How do you use policies and laws and procedures to represent to everyone that this city welcomes? It doesn't matter your sexual orientation, the color of your skin, your views and values, but everyone is welcome here. I would love to hear from each of you. Ms. Mc.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's what I say, and that's what my campaign stands for. I'm running to promote a more inclusive and equitable city. And part of that means being, doing things, but also being a champion for every single community, which I say all the time, whether it is members of our LGBTQ plus community, it is members of our lower wealth community, it is members of our unsheltered community. But someone who is a champion, I have done that. I continue, like I mentioned all the time, roll up my sleeves and I do the work. I'm in the community all the time, talking with people in marginalized communities and make them understand that not only will you have a voice in the mayor's office, but you will have a listening ear, someone who will listen to you and what your needs are and making sure that we're moving forward. We've already started that this week. Council unanimously appointed an advisory committee on equality, which will be to make recommendations to council and the mayor's office on LGBTQ plus policy and making sure that we're moving forward. I have also proposed, and you'll see on my website, I propose having an equity officer in the mayor's office, someone who will look at every single thing we do at the city through an equity lens, whether it is zoning or investments or ordinances. We will have somebody who will look at it through an equity lens, because sometimes there are ordinances, even well-meaning, that have a negative impact on marginalized communities of color. And so I want to make sure that we have somebody who is, their job every day is to look at equity throughout the city and make sure that we are addressing it in that way. So those are just a few things I would do as mayor, but I certainly have a lot more, and I'd encourage anybody to go to my website, devineformayor.com, and see more about our equity policy.
Thank you. Mr. Badora.
I had you muted. So sorry. It's hard to answer this question without being a little bit take it personal. I came to the city when I was 16, 17 years old. Didn't speak the language, looked different. There's everything about me was different. There's a lot of ways for other citizens or other people to discriminate against me, which in the past that I have been. So for me to sit here and talk about welcoming every group and all that, it's a no-brainer. Of course, we need to welcome everybody to the city, and we need to be part of that welcome. I know there was a lot of discussion about the gay lesbians groups, and it's important that we have to respect everybody's way of living, way of who they are, that kind of thing. It's important for a mayor to lead that effort into equality and bring justice to all the people who doesn't want to be equality and discriminate and create problems where it shouldn't be. So I'm the one who's probably the first one who would say everybody is welcome, no matter who you are, that kind of thing, because we're all children of God. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had Mr. Rickerman, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, the reality is that the city has made many strides. If you go back historically and look at the strides we did in 08, 10, 11, and 19, where we worked with the equality community on making sure there's no discrimination in hotels and rentals and everything else, we've really reached out as a community to kind of make changes and welcome everybody. We've all welcomed the Pride parade. We've all invested in trying to make sure that every part of our city is thing. We're not always going to agree on issues that come before us, and not everything's we're going to vote for everything, but we have conversations. And I think that's important. But we have a lot of aspects in this community. We continue have to work with all communities. I mean, that's the Hispanic, that's Asian, that's African American, that's the LGBTQ group. That means everybody, because I think in the one thing that Columbia has always strived for, and I've been through 2 different administrations, and I can tell you that the one thing everybody wants everybody to be welcome here and to be home. Are we always going to agree on issues? No. Is everything going to go one group's way or another group's way? No. But the fact that this group has historically and continues today, and hopefully moving forward, that we'll always sit at the table and have conversations to move us forward is the most important thing. Because we can't solve problems lecturing at each other from a podium. We only can do it sitting around the table and discussing it and understanding and moving forward. But there's one thing I know about this community. I don't care if it's from law enforcement to employment. We always strive to try to make things better for everybody without having any discrimination. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Do we have opportunity to grow? Yes, but we need to make sure that we involve every group moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Me and my wife are blessed to live in Elmwood Park, one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Columbia. And when I look at the diversity that we have represented in our neighborhood, I think about Columbia as the most diverse city in the state. You look at the diverse talent that we attract with the University of South Carolina, Columbia College, Allen University, and Benedict College. We've got to make sure that we continue to be the tip of the spear as it relates to inclusivity, making sure that we accept everyone's culture and that it's on display. And so when I think about some of the wonderful festivals that we have downtown, we've got to make sure that we highlight those and promote those and make sure that people all around this country know that what we have to offer. And then when I think about some of those symbolic displays that are extremely important, and I think about, for example, SC Pride and the wonderful festival that they put on each and every year, we need to move that directly in front of the State House as a symbolic example of who we are and what we stand for. And so those are the types of opportunities that we have to take. And when I think about Columbia and I think about our history, we have always been a very welcoming society. I look at Lutheran Family Services and what they've done when called upon here in Columbia. And so that's the type of spirit that we have to make sure that we embody here in Columbia, and that we continue to, and make sure that not only our actions verbally represent that, but also make sure that our policy also represents that as well.
Thank you. And one question, the next question is from the audience. We're going to open it up to the questions from the audience. And I believe that if we keep it at 1 minute responses to these questions, we can wrap up in a time right at 5 o'clock, right? Because that's what we promised. I want to honor everyone's time on the call today. So Mr. Rickerman, this question is for you. You propose lowering property taxes on non-owner occupied properties. How would you make up for the loss of revenue?
Well, you got to look at it this way. You're not talking about lost revenue. You're talking about creating a soil and a baseline for people to invest. So if by levelizing the tax structure, if let's say if we capped it per se for the next 5 years, that would lower the tax rate probably somewhere between 27 and 30%, which make us competitive. Well, if we have investment coming in, that means that we're bringing in more money than we had before. And in that simple structure, I would recommend that we would take that money and we put it into a reserve account, and then that reserve account gets split by the agencies. But what you've seen historically in other communities that have made those bold moves, that they've had tremendous amount of investment come in, which means they're getting more money than they currently are. They're not stable. So you're not losing money, you're gaining money.
Thank you. And this next question is for each of you. And I'm going to read it because it's a very thought-provoking question. As a region, looking at the latest census info just released, Columbia is falling way behind Greenville and Charleston. New airlines are going to those areas. Businesses are moving their headquarters out of Columbia. Manufacturing is leaving. What will you do as mayor to reverse these trends? And I'll start with, since she's right next to me on my Zoom, is Councilwoman Devine, and then we'll go to Sam Johnson, and then Moe Baddour, and then Daniel Rickenman, just because that's you're on my order, and that helps me keep.
Well, thank you. And you said a minute, so I'm gonna try and be really brief. There's a lot of things that we need to do. One thing we need to understand is that there's not a one size fits all solution to certain things. There are, all of these things are intersectional, and we have to look at it that way. One of the things that Greenville and Charleston has done, when I talk about promoting a more inclusive and equitable city, both of them have gotten to the point where they have moved that forward. As a council person, someone who spearheaded the conversation on the color of law and equity within our city, I have asked my colleagues, and they agreed that we do undertake a equity survey. Charleston and Greenville have done that, and both are moving forward with their equity action plans. I think understanding that we have to have the quality of life here that makes it good for people is very important. We also need to make sure that we are developing the workforce that businesses need. And so we have got to make sure we are strengthening our relationship with our higher education, our technical colleges, and our K through 12 to make sure that we are providing that workforce. You know, looking at cutting taxes for schools is not important, is not the way to go. We need to look at strengthening our schools and strengthening our workforce, having workforce development programs. And so those are two of the things that I would do. But again, go to my website, divineformayor.com, because there's a lot about this on how we will be more competitive.
Thank you. Mr. Badour.
Listen, I'll have to agree on some of the stuff that was said, but the first and foremost, we're not Greenville or Charleston. This is two different dynamics. We're a college town and a Fort Jackson kind of town, plus we're the capital. So it's important to realize that in the back of your head. At the same time, quality of life is important. Safety is extremely important. And then another important part of it is the corruption. When investors or other people trying to move to the city or try to invest in our city, all they hear about what happened to the penny sales tax that's going on with Richland County, that was, it's filibuster. There's so much misspending everywhere. When you hear about, what happened to Ellen Benedict Court, where 2 people died and nobody held accountable. When you hear about the tax incentive that was offered for the student housing, when you hear about the money that we spend on Bull Street, it doesn't make sense in a lot of investors because we need that money to spend to better our quality of life. So all that coming together, it comes back to the leadership and we can do from now on. The quality of life is number one. And the leader that leads into the future has to be involved and understanding that what basic services are needed for not only the citizens that get them elected, but for the investors that come in, that bring more people into town, that bring more population to increase our population and to invest. They want to have a safe secure investment in our city and our people. And the only way to do that, if we can get all three of them together and make sure our leadership is there to protect those investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
So first, public safety is core, right? If we're going to grow Columbia, if we're going to see the type of growth that we have, the ability, the natural assets that we have here, like our river and so many other natural assets like the university, the college presence that we have here, we've got to make sure that Columbia is the safest place possible, which means that we pour resources into Columbia to make sure that we retain our officers, as I mentioned earlier. But we got to be very dedicated to growing a very diverse economy here, an economy that is reflective of every job and talent that we have on display here in Columbia. So one of our plans calls for the development of the Columbia Career Academy, realizing that we've got to make sure that we are extremely creative in tackling the solution, bringing Richland 1 and 2 together, Midlands Tech, making sure that we teach some of these job skills, these knowledge economy job opportunities that we have here, making sure that they are accessible and attainable to all of our citizens here in Columbia. We got to have an incentive structure that makes sure that development happens all across Columbia, not just in one particular region or area. And so we've got to make sure that neighborhoods and communities get development all across the city.
Thank you. Mr. Rickerman.
To be competitive today, the reality is that we need to employ our economic development folks. Other cities, you go to Greenville, you go to Lexington, Kentucky, you go to Columbus, Ohio, you go to Charlotte, look at the growth that they're having. Well, their economic development teams have the tools and the ability. They're traveling every day. They're going to find, today's world is not recruiting businesses, recruiting developers. They bring the businesses with them. And that is a big competitive edge that a lot of communities have over us, because every day they're traveling, meeting and encouraging and showing them how they're business friendly and how quickly they can do business in our town and their towns, and encourage them there. The second piece to it is we have to develop some more job opportunities, training opportunities. And it's not just the knowledge economy that we need to focus on, it's the basics. It's electricians, heavy equipment operators. The city is looking for employees right now with heavy equipment operator experience. So is all the CDL drivers, all the things that make everything work around here, from electrical to HVAC, is something that we really need to focus. It gives an opportunity. In our neighboring county, Lexington, there's a program created by the private sector and joint with Lexington County Technical College, where they're training electricians. Powell Electric is a company there. 57% of their employee workforce is 25 and under, all making $22.50 an hour to start. That's where we need to be focused.
Thank you. I want to have an agreement that we're right at like 3 minutes away from 5. So if everybody's okay to give about 10 more minutes of your time to answer a few more citizen questions, that would be great. If everybody has the time and their schedule, I want to make sure that I get agreement from everyone.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. This next question is from someone in the audience, and I'll read it. The city is growing sometimes into areas that don't want to be a part of the city and don't really have strong city resources. What are candidates' plans for annexation? And I would like to start, I'm going to go in order from the bottom of my screen up. So Mr. Rickerman, then Sam Johnson, and then Mr. Badora, and then Ms. Devine.
I think annexation right now is not the top priority. It wouldn't be, and I don't think it should be at this point. We have so many opportunities within our city limits now. We haven't taken advantage of vertical growth in other areas that could balance out with our infrastructure we already have. I think we need to focus internally right now on reinvesting both in making sure that we have every pothole fixed, sidewalk fixed, beautification. As we've noticed, there has been a tremendous amount of discussion around litter and waste and the appearance of the city. So I think our obligations right now is to stay focused, improve, and make sure that we have the cleanest, safest city that we have internally before we start looking to annex anywhere.
Thank you.
So I think one of the things that we have to focus on, and our state has very archaic annexation laws by state statute. And so that's a conversation for another day. But as it relates to Columbia, I think one of the challenges, and I think that question is hitting on, expounding our boundaries outward. I think one of the things that we really have to make sure that we're focusing on is the donut holes that we have here in Columbia. We have so many folks who are trying to access services and trying to figure out if they're in Columbia or if they're being serviced by unincorporated Richland County or another municipality. We've got to make sure that there's clarity there, and so that we're more customer friendly in answering those questions and providing folks with the right connection. And then I think we also have to make sure that at the end of the day that people know that they're safe and they're going to get the very best education possible here in Columbia. And so I think those are the two primary things that we have to do, and we can have a conversation about expanding our boundaries and our state statutes later.
Thank you, Mr. Badora.
Oh, thank you. Yes, annexation it's kind of a big deal, actually. Donut hole is number one. We have to fill and we have to bring it back to the city. Look, the services are already surrounded donut holes all over the city. It's important that we bring them into the city so they can all share the same services we offer in that area. Number two, we need to expand our annexation to where our water and sewer system goes to. Everybody understand that you can't have annexation without water and sewer, and it's important that we emphasize that to residents in the new neighborhoods or the new area that we want to annex and reach out to, how important the system is. But before we just go out there and reach, we need to make sure that our services are up to par, up to what people expect for them to be part of that city, to pay that extra millage to be part of the city. So it's important for us to clean our act, improve our quality of life, stop the corruption, for people to start coming into and want to be in our city limit and be annexed into our services. And that's my answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devine.
Thank you, Ms. King. I think the question really focused on annexing when people don't want to. And so I really think that we need to understand that we have to have a city leader who makes sure that we are providing the right information to people. Just as we see right now during COVID-19, sometimes people hear misinformation and they get an opinion about something without having all the facts. So I think it's very important that if there are areas where the city needs to grow, that it makes sense for us to grow, that we are talking to the constituents in that area, explaining what does annexation mean, what does it mean to be a city resident, and what services we provide. So I think that's key. I do agree, donut holes, and I think we all would agree, all four of us, is a priority. As the city looks at annexation, we've got to annex donut holes in places that make sense for us to have in the city, because people are still confused as to whether or not they live in the city or not. We talk to people all the time during the campaign, and they don't know if they live in the city or not. And I kind of tell them, well, is your recycling bin blue? Well, then that means you're in the city. If it's not, then you're not. But there are people who think they're in the city or not, and vice versa. So we have to address that. And then about our laws. I mean, we need to understand that, our mayor, part of the reason or part of the job of the mayor would be to continue to build on relationships locally and on state level, and be at the State House and advocate for making sure that we are growing it. And then lastly, I see your pen, but lastly, we have to understand that just because it makes sense because of water and sewer expansion, if we can't support that area in other ways, police, fire, roads, then it may not make sense to annex. And so again, we have to be strategic with our annexations. We have to understand about growing the city, but also about making sure that we are a partner in the region and growing the Midlands region.
Thank you. And this next question is about community policing. And so they wanted to know how each of the candidates would apply it as it relates to gang violence, homelessness, and communities who feel left out. They would like to know how each of you will address that. And so I'll start kind of in the middle. So I'll go Sam Johnson, then I'll go Tameika Isaac Devine, and then I'll say Daniel Rickerman, and then Mr. Badour.
Absolutely. Great question. So 2014, I remember when President Obama and Vice President Biden at that time released their 21st Century Policing Task Force guidelines. One of the pleasures I had during my time in the mayor's office was to work with our police department to implement those guidelines. And so they focus heavily on community policing and building those relationships and trust. And I think that's one of the key elements that you have to have between your police department and your community. And so when we talk about gangs, or we're talking about homelessness, when we're talking about the community at large, what we're talking about is the ability for our police department to build trust. And one of the things that we have to do in order to help our police department have the resources in order to do that and to build that relationship is give them the resources that they need, right? So if we have a police department that is understaffed, then it's tough to build that relationship and make sure that you have confidence in that relationship. And so when we look at these shootings that are happening, for example, all across our city, we've got to make sure that we are very focused and prioritize and show the leadership that we have to show in order to yield that result. And so that's one of the things that I've had an amazing opportunity to lead on. And as we look at how society is shifting, as we look at the mental health challenges that we're having here in Columbia, but aren't unique to our city, that are prevalent all across this country, we've got to make sure that we're investing in our police department and in the resources that they need, like mental health professionals, which is what our public safety plan calls for. So we've got to make sure not only do we have mental health professionals, but the social workers in the type of structure and expertise that we have to have in order to deal with that challenge.
Thank you. Councilwoman Devine.
Thank you. So a couple things. Community policing is very important. And I think that we have to understand what models work. We need to look at evidence-based models that deal with gangs, that deal with other violence, but particularly understanding how our law enforcement, community policing can be utilized in every area. We are very lucky that under a former police chief, we had the residential co-bonds. I think we need to consider bringing those back and putting residential co-bonds in communities so that we are developing that relationship. Our deputy police chief, Melron Kelly, lived in a residential co-bond, and he lived there before he was married and had kids in the community. And so I think those models are very important, and we need to bring those back. I think especially when it deals with gangs, we have to focus on positive outcomes for our young people and use evidence-based solutions that really get young people early age and don't get them to the point where they are interested in gangs. And so that is developing those relationships. That is the police athletic league. Just a few weeks ago, we were playing kickball with our law enforcement and our kids. We need to have more programs like that. So we are meeting kids where they are, we're in the community, and that they understand that there are ways. We also need to look at how do we target jobs in areas, because some people get involved in gangs because that's a way to make money. And so we need to make sure that we are addressing the needs in our underserved populations and getting them tied to jobs and other potential things so they're not getting involved in gangs. Thank you.
Mr. Badora.
Thank you. I'm glad the other two candidates so far agreeing with me about community policing, because that's what I've been preaching about since our campaign began, and even for the long time. So community policing is important, not only to fight gangs and neighborhood crimes, but also to enhance our young children into staying out of trouble. And that's what we need to come in and make sure that substations are in our neighborhoods. That our substations officers and police officers know everybody's around them in the neighborhood. All the kids that could be troublemakers or maybe lost, they're having family issues that could prevent them into going to gangs or doing the wrong things. So it's important that community policing is be part of our future plan to make our city better. It's important that we bring and make people understand that work programs for a lot of the homeless and the young people. We need to encourage that from a city. As a mayor and as a small businessman who understand restaurant business and small businesses and maybe training and teaching young adults, that's something that I would love to get into my hands on and get the small program into getting the young people and the homeless people into teach them a trade, as in either cooking or in the hospitality industry, just to get them started, to stay away from trouble and to find their path into the future and make a career out of it. Look, I made a career out of being a restaurant owner or being in the restaurant business. I believe Daniel did that for a little while too, and it's something that very rewarding, and I think young people would find that extremely important. But at the bottom line is, we need to build our trust back into our city government. And the only way to do that is to be active with them as much as we can and provide the services and the programs to make them a better person for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. We've reached right at 5:10, and man, we have covered a lot of ground in an hour and a half. I hope that the citizens.
Daniel answered that question.
So am I not going to get allowed to answer the question?
It's so many of you all. I'm trying to keep you all.
I see how this is going.
I'm sorry.
Y'all get me because I didn't return that book back in 1989.
You've got the plan. You've got my plan. You figured me out. I apologize. Please, Mr. Rickenman,
No
please answer.
Hey, I appreciate you watching for our time. Community policing is we've all talked about. There's different aspects and different ways to look at it. Obviously, we want to have feet in the street. I mean, we really want those connections. But this is a three-legged stool, and we've got to look at it from all. I mean, we're doing everything we can for recruitment, enhancements, signing bonuses. We've hired a mental health social worker who's been there probably less than a month, but we've started to adapt what Sheriff Leon Lott has done. So we're doing things like that, but we still have challenges, and the community is a challenge. We need to work with the community. The community needs to work with us because they know what's going on in their neighborhood and they know where that is. That's part of that three-legged stool. And the other thing that we haven't talked about yet is the judicial issue that we have constantly letting criminals repeat, especially those with gun offenses, let out. And that's just that's not solving our problem. If you look at our repeat offenders and the events that have happened in most of the city and every part of our city, it doesn't matter if it's 29203 or 29205, it's the same persons that are involved in this. And this is a problem. We need to put pressure on our legislature. We need our community to come together with our officers and our local governments to create that bond and share information, because we can't do it by ourselves. This has now become a community-wide issue at every level, and so we need to address it that way. We can't forget that it is a three-legged stool. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being so gracious that I kind of left you out just a little bit at the end. But thank you all for being here. We're going to end with this last question, but I wanted to thank each of you for being here. We've covered a lot of ground in an hour and a half plus, and this will be recorded. So if anyone hasn't had a chance to view it, or if you joined late, you'll be able to view this on the library's website in the coming days. But the last question is, there are a few questions that we didn't get answered from the community. So the first question I want to ask is, how do people get in touch with you to ask those questions straight directly to you? And then also, why should they vote for you? This is your final plea as to why people should vote for you this coming November. And I'll start with Mr. Rickerman, just because he thinks that the library is vindictive in our policy of moderating debates. So Mr. Rickerman, please.
I'd love to have a conversation with everybody. Look, plain and simple, you can email me directly, or better yet, please just send me a text or call my cell, 803-920-9541. I'm about as most accessible as possible. Look, we're at a turning point for Columbia. What we decide today and over the next few months is going to define us for the next decades. And I hope that the community will consider looking at things and looking how we're discussing about issues, about basic services, about economic and job growth, about supporting the small businesses and the entrepreneurial, taking a look at affordable housing and how we tackle these issues together as a group. As I said, this is we have to do this together, and we have a big opportunity, and we need to take it seriously and work together. This isn't just a regular election. This is a monumental election that really will define our community for the next decade. And I don't want to be Charleston, and I don't want to be Greenville. I want to be Columbia, South Carolina, and I want it to live to its best potential.
Thank you. Councilwoman Devine.
Thank so much to the library, and thank you for all of those who tuned in. As said before, I'm Tameika Isaac Devine, candidate for mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. You can always get in touch with me. You can go to my website, divineformayor.com. You can email me or call me. I'm arguably probably even currently the most successful council member. I always return calls and emails, and typically early in the morning, late at night. But as far as this campaign, I will say that, again, I'm honored to have humbly served this city over the last several years. We have done so much together, but we still have so much work yet to be done. This is a very important election. We are dealing with so much. We have challenges, but we also have opportunities. Columbia is a great place. I love this city. And I look forward to being able to continue to serve the city in a bigger, bolder way. We need proven leadership. Someone who is ready on day one. We can't afford to have anybody learning on the job. We need someone who understands this city, how great her people are, how great her assets are, and how to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us. I am that person. I've given proven leadership. I'm experienced, and I understand how to get things done. I roll up my sleeves every day to get to work with you and for you. And certainly as your council person, I have showed up for you. And as your next mayor, I will show out for you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
First of all, Ms. King, thank you so much for doing a wonderful job moderating this, and a special thanks to your blue pen. We've appreciated it. First, I would say I look forward to having dialogue. I want to talk about Columbia's future. Feel free to give me a call or send me an email. My cell is 803-397-5920. My email is sam@sampjohnson.com. Feel free to ping me on both. Hit me on social media. I'm happy to have a dialogue through any medium. Feel free to reach out to me. As this is a very important conversation that we're having here. As we talk about Columbia's future, someone who's born and raised here, I think about where we go from here. I want to make sure that Columbia is the safest city possible, that we have the brightest opportunities ahead of us, that we're able to make sure that our future is one that is not limited by imagination, leadership, or vision. That we're able to make sure that we are primed for growth, and that Columbia really takes off, guys. I'm so excited as we talk about this conversation around Columbia's future. So I look forward to having that dialogue. I look forward to sharing and thinking and having conversations. If you have concerns, I want to hear them. If you have ideas, I want those. This is an important dialogue for us to have, not monologue. I want to make sure that you have a two-way street here. So I'm looking forward to this conversation this year, and I'm glad to be the only one here that has mayoral experience, somebody who knows how to get the job done. So I'm looking forward to this conversation as we lead to November. And I want to make sure that we have Columbia pivoted well to make sure that our future is bright.
Thank you. Mr. Badora, last but certainly not least.
Oh, thank you. I am honored to be part of this panel, of course, and I am honored to be a candidate for the high position in the city government as a mayor. But let me just start by saying I am one of the only people on candidate that came to the city at a younger age. I came to follow the American dream. I came to get away from bullets flying over my head because of the civil war we had back home. I came to reunite with Uncle Andy, but at the same time, I came for the American dream. And I guarantee you as a mayor, and I promise you as a mayor, I will continue that dream. I will continue to work hard to make that dream available for any young people, any young person that is willing to go after and wanted to achieve his American dream. I will bring the trust back in our city. I will stop the corruption anywhere possible. I'll make our city safe for anyone to go and walk down the street without looking behind their back, whether they're going to get jumped or not. I promise you, and I make promises like I always do with just like I did with the Ediston Court. I promised those citizens to be back in their homes by Christmas times, and I did. And I promise you, I will clean up the city. I will bring the trust back into the city. And the way to talk to me about it more, you can call me at my cell phone at 803-318-3111, or go to my website as mo4mayor.com. Thank you all for having us, and it's an honor to be here with y'all.
Thank each of you for generously giving your time and your phone numbers. I just envision you doing like this all week, because people are going to want to call you. So thank you for being open. Thank you for giving us your time and your energy. And thank you for answering the call, because on this call is our next mayor. And so we thank you so much for joining us today and giving people a chance, like our executive director said, to be better informed and more informed about the choices that they make. Thank each of you. Thank you all for joining us today. And remember, this is a recorded conversation, and it will be available on the library's website in the coming days. Thank you.